Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first in a series of market briefings we're running this week. And next, pre the hybrid ATE we have this year, to update you all on the various market situations around the world. Hard to believe it's almost 9 months since we did the last one, a few months into the pandemic. For those who don't know me, my name's Lee Sorensen from the industry team here at TA, and we're really pleased to be able to bring you our North American briefing this morning. I'll be getting us started here this morning and then facilitating some question and answers at the end, time permitting. Before we begin though, in the spirit of reconciliation, Tourism Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This morning, first up, you'll hear from our Regional General Manager for the Americas, Jane Whitehead. Jane will take you through the state of things in the USA and Canada, including the light that is finally starting to appear in this very dark tunnel we're all in, as well as, of course, TA's strategy in preparing for border reopenings. And importantly, we'll cover off on ATE and what that means for North American participants. Jane is then going to introduce and hand over to the first of our guest speakers, Jane Kuster, the EVP Managing Director for MMGY Myriad, who's going to take us through some really insightful recent American consumer and travel trade research they have done. Following that, we'll have our Regional Partnership Manager for North America, Chris Allison, introduce our next guest, Beth Butzlaff, who is the Vice President Global Partner Relations for Virtuoso. Beth and Chris are then going to have a discussion on the distribution view of things in North America from a Virtuoso perspective before we finish up with some Q&A. So just some housekeeping around all this before I hand to Jane. This session will be recorded and available at a later date on the registration site. A link will be sent to everyone when it has been made available. Through the course of the webinar now, if you can submit any questions that you've got at the Q&A option at the bottom of the screen, preferably do it as we go along. It's always hard to manage these at the end when we get 50 questions all roll into us in the last 5 or 10 minutes. And as I mentioned earlier, if we have time, we'll review those questions and get some of the speakers to answer. Otherwise, we'll respond to others after the briefing. And also, if you can please complete the survey at the conclusion of the webinar, which we'll send to you. It only takes about a minute, but it will give us valuable feedback about what you'd like to hear about in future briefings. So that's it from me. On that note, I'm now going to hand over to Jane.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this market update. To start, got ahead of myself with the slides. To start, just a reminder of the importance and value of the North American market before this pandemic. In 2019, we surpassed 1 million visitors from the US and Canada combined, and the US ranked second only to China in total spend. The past year has changed so much for our industry. And of course, North America, as you know, has been particularly hard hit by the pandemic, with more than 31 million cases in the US and tragically more than 559,000 deaths. In Canada, more than 1 million cases and more than 23,000 deaths. The human cost has been terrible and the economic cost vast. Today, though, I want to highlight the dramatic and rapid turnaround in this situation that is happening, especially in the US, as a result of the accelerating vaccine rollout. Within a week, all adult Americans will be eligible to book vaccine appointments, and there's an incredible sense of rising optimism as hope builds that we can start to emerge from the pandemic and reopen with sensible precautions in the next couple of months. We pulled together a short video of some recent US news clips, which you may or may not have seen, just to give you a sense of this growing hope and excitement.
By no later than April 19th, in every part of this country, every adult over the age of 18 or older will be eligible to be vaccinated. We're going to go from 1 million shots a day that I promised in December, before I was sworn in, to beating our current pace of 2 million shots a day.
That's where we are today, the lowest case rates, positivity rates, that is, in America. We are seeing bright light at the end of the tunnel. And on June 15th, all things well, we continue that good work.
The Roaring 20s were a time of men in tuxedos and women in flapper dresses, partying like there's no tomorrow. Now, get ready for a flashback.
We're going to have a post-pandemic period that in some will resemble the roaring 20s of a...
As of this morning,
Oops. Sorry, a little bit of a glitch with that video, but hopefully that does give you a bit of a sense of where we're at. And I think the last clip that was missing was just a clip talking about the pent-up demand for travel, and how many Americans are just really raring to get back out there and travel and experience the world again. We're by no means through the woods, and there are concerns about new variants and not letting our guard down too soon. The rollout in Canada has been a bit slower due to supply constraints, and there are new lockdowns. For example, Ontario is under a 28-day stay-at-home order currently. Hopefully, these precautions will contain the virus as the vaccine rollout picks up pace. But certainly, across North America, I think there's increasingly light at the end of this long tunnel. I know many of you have submitted questions, and unfortunately we don't know when Australia will be in a position to reopen borders. However, the Prime Minister has discussed that the government is working with an expert medical panel on a framework to reopen. In the meantime, we're continuing to do consumer research, tracking sentiment across all of our key markets. In the US, you can see from the most recent study in March, there is rising sentiment around travel, and Julie and Beth will talk more in their sessions about what they're seeing. One thing I would like to draw attention to in this most recent wave in March is the rising consideration, intention, and general attitudes to Australia. Sorry, just a bit of a lag with the slides. So specifically, 64%, as you can see here, of respondents, up 7%, said they would like to travel to Australia sometime, and 45%, up 10%, said Australia would be on their top list of countries to travel to once the crisis is over. And in Canada, you can see that there's rising confidence in travel intention, although immediate booking intention remains low as borders remain closed. There's also rising consideration and intention, with 61% wanting to visit Australia at some point in the future, and nearly a third citing that it's among top countries that they want to visit when the crisis is over. We've been fortunate with the commitment that key airlines have shown throughout this crisis. United has continued operating services between the US and Australia throughout the pandemic, and American Airlines and Delta have added services back as well, notwithstanding the significant challenges in flight caps. Qantas plans reinstating international flights from the end of October, obviously subject to borders reopening, and is monitoring the situation. We remain in regular contact with our airline partners, and they will be key partners in recovery activities as soon as we have a timeline on the reopening. Many of you will be familiar with this overall approach that TA is taking to this crisis. We're acting in two parts. First, we want to ensure that we keep consumer and industry audiences engaged while borders remain closed. And we want to ensure we have plans in place to move immediately to support recovery as soon as borders reopen. Throughout this year, we've always had an always-on search, social and content program with a basic investment to keep consumers inspired to visit Australia when travel resumes. We've been very active on the PR front with inspirational content, and we've maintained a robust virtual trade engagement program. After the past year of virtual travel content, as vaccines roll out, we've been seeing a shift in focus to coverage and anticipation of the post-pandemic travel splurge. While the pandemic has caused great financial stress for many, there are also many who've boosted savings during the lockdown and are eager to make up for lost time. There's coverage in the media of destinations that are reopening to people that are either vaccinated or present a negative test. There's great interest in sustainable travel, nature and outdoors, road trips and luxury experiences. And we're highlighting positive stories of what Australia offers as inspirational content. As the focus shifts, we'll need to be creative to keep audiences engaged and reserve some of that pent-up demand for Australia. In our consumer marketing, we've had good engagement with content on Facebook and Instagram and run content with Apple News, New York Times, and National Geographic, among others. We've promoted the wonderful immersive 8D videos that some of you may be familiar with and encouraged audiences to explore more inspirational content on australia.com. This week, we're launching a new video series with Lonely Planet, leveraging Australia making their 2021 Best in Travel list. In PR, we've worked with state and territory partners to proactively seed stories presenting Australia as a safe, desirable destination when borders reopen. We've run virtual events, from the successful Live from Oz last year to a Taste of Australia cook-along event with Chef Curtis Stone, and 19 US and Canadian media last month, which attracted extensive broadcast and digital coverage. We're collaborating with another friend of Australia, Dan Churchill, on another series of broadcast segments on healthy living Aussie style over coming weeks. Later this month, renowned publisher Phaidon is launching in Australia the cookbook, a new Australia-inspired cookbook that will work with embassy and consulates to leverage for media interest too. We've been identifying broadcast partnership opportunities, leveraging talent that's already in Australia, including Renee Barr, TV presenter of Extra, and other top US and international programs, showcasing wildlife, Indigenous culture, regeneration of animal habitats post bushfires, and much more. During this year, we've maintained a strong program of education through our Aussie Specialist program. And so far this year, we've trained over 6,000 agents between the US and Canada and maintained a strong pool of 3,000 qualified Aussie specialists. We've got a strong pipeline of 1,300 trainees that are actively working with to convert to become qualified. We've continued to implement also a range of initiatives in the Aussie Specialist channel to keep the community engaged, including a new Facebook group that's grown to nearly 900 members, webinars, and other fun and interactive educational initiatives. We've had really encouraging engagement with these initiatives, as many advisors use this crisis to upskill and ensure that they're ready to make up ground when borders reopen. We've had a strong presence across virtual event platforms with a focus towards premium and adventure, but also ensuring we cater to broader interest categories. With the growing rate of vaccination, we expect a big return to in-person events in this market in the second half of the year. We've also continued to stay engaged with our core consortia partners during the past 9 months, and you'll hear from Beth later. These partners represent over 65,000 travel advisors in North America and over 40% of total travel agency revenue. These partners and their network of advisors will play a key role in supporting recovery when borders reopen. Similarly, we've had an active business events virtual industry engagement program, and you can see some of the initiatives here. In this segment too, optimism is rising, and we're certainly seeing more leads for 2022 onwards. As in the leisure space, Australia's handling of the pandemic has been very well regarded, and with an increased focus on safety, this will be a key advantage in reputation. As we begin planning for the coming year, we'll continue with these initiatives to keep Australia top of mind for consumer and industry, while also refreshing recovery plans to be ready to move quickly when we have a timeline for reopening. Clearly, conversion will be front and centre of these plans, delivered through key partnerships with airlines and distribution partners in market. Despite the ongoing border closures, we've had strong interest in attendance at ATE this year, with 127 primary delegate applications received, including 45 of our premier Aussie specialists. While some businesses haven't been able to commit or have rationalised participation due to business prioritisation and reduced staffing, we do have more than double the number of participants in this virtual event that we would typically have attend ATE in person. The addition of the ATE Lux program this year is something we're really excited about and have been pleased with the interest. We'll continue to recruit ATE Lux buyers over the coming days. The majority of our Lux buyers are first-time attendees and have been recruited from across the Virtuoso network, the Global Travel Collection brand, including Pro and Zell Travel. Many of the Lux buyers are independent contractors. In terms of what to expect from our buyers in North America, the big question, of course, that we are unable to answer is when our borders will reopen. But beyond that, many of our buyers will have clients that are currently booked for later this year, as well as a growing list of leads for clients who wish to book new travel into 2022. Key themes that are likely to come up are around flexibility for new bookings, rate change impacts on bookings that are currently being held for later this year and where guests are considering rebooking into next year, as well as general questions around safety. Many of our partners are looking for new and unique experiences with key themes such as escapism. So to keep time, I'll wrap up there. Thank you so much for your ongoing commitment to the North America market and for joining this session today. We're really excited to connect at ATE. And now I would like to turn over to Julie Questa, who is Executive Vice President and Managing Director of MMGY Myriad. Julie will be sharing with you some of their latest research on travel sentiment and also the most recent study that they've done on the impact of COVID on North America distribution. Thanks for joining us, Julie.
Thanks, Jane. I appreciate the introduction. So I'm going to jump right into it because I have a lot of slides and a lot of content to get to. Hopefully it's... So as Jane mentioned, I'm with MMGY Global. I know I've worked with many of you as many years that MMGY Myriad has worked with in the Northern Territory. But really one of the things that MMGY Global is known for is our data insights. And it's really the foundation of much of the work that we do. So today what I'm going to do is present sort of research from 3 key studies that we've been doing. We just released in the last couple of weeks the Portrait of the American Traveller, and this looks at a broad range of American travelers and what they're interested in, and there's certainly some very topical research. We're planning to do that 4 times in the coming year. We've got some historic information from the Portrait of the American International Traveller that specifically looks at international travelers and what they're interested in, and we've done this for the last 3 years in conjunction with USTOA. And then the most detailed bit of information I have is from a recent global travel distribution survey that we did, and I'll get into the more specifics of how we did that research in a little bit. So to speak to the travel intentions, I know this is an area that everyone in Australia is very interested in, but we've been tracking travel sentiment in the US since about 2007, and basically with 100 being the baseline, we've really watched 6 key sentiments to see what consumers are interested in and what they're looking for in travel. As you can see, it took some really strong dips, and this was around the global financial crisis, but of late we've actually seen it increase, and the most recent has been really, really positive. And we know that Americans are really interested to travel. Understandably, that's going to come back with domestic travel first, but it really will move into international in due course. A few of the key areas that we research or we make up this travel sentiment includes interest in travel, and that's actually returned to pre-pandemic levels. So obviously the interest is out there, and American consumers do want to get back to travel. The other thing that is really interesting, their perception of the affordability of travel has never been higher. At 207 points, it's at an all-time high. And part of this is obviously being driven by recent deals and specials that I would say they could have got 3 or 4 months ago. But we do think that this is going to shift. The demand for domestic travel in the US is increasing. I can personally tell experience. I was traveling last week and it's busy. There are people in many key destinations. So we do anticipate that this affordability may shift, but I do think it's a good sign for travelers and destinations, even long haul destinations. And one of the reasons that we think this perception of affordability is because personal finances available for travel is actually also in a very positive place. And as Jane mentioned, the pandemic has been a bit of a tale of 2 different types of people: those that have managed to save during the pandemic, that haven't suffered unemployment and those sorts of things, and then those obviously that have suffered significantly. And that's why we think that this area is showing some positivity, especially for those that have managed to save and not had to spend on different things during the pandemic. So intention to take a vacation during the next 6 months has increased. It has increased for those in the higher wage areas. So I do think that this bodes well for long-term for Australia. We know that those in the affluent bucket and those with higher household incomes are travelling. Interestingly, while the boomers are getting the ones getting vaccinated first and the ones that you would think maybe would travel, intention shows that they maybe will take less trips, but they will spend time and money when they take those trips. So we think that's impacting the overall intent to travel. So one of the things that we've been doing throughout COVID is actually tracking this travel safety barometer, and there's numerous travel safety items that we've been tracking, but I just wanted to share two today just to give you a frame of reference. That domestic travel for the US is tracking at about 56 out of 100. And as you can see from this slide, it was down to a low of 30 and now has increased significantly. People think that they feel safe. International clearly has a ways to go, but as people do more domestic travel, we know that that will grow into international and they will feel more safe about international travel. So then, as I mentioned, a big part of what I'm going to present today is this global travel distribution survey. We did this in conjunction with a number of agencies around the world that make up the collection of travel council agencies. We looked at this in 20 source markets. We did the survey in over 11 languages. What I'm going to share today is really just the North American focus, so from Canada and the US. We had about 1,300 participants worldwide, and there was close to about 400 in North America. We partnered with our distribution or our CRM partner, TA Connect, that manages our travel advisor database, and we were able to go out to agency owners and managers. So most of this information is focused on what those agency owners and managers are saying. We had 72% of retail travel agents actually complete the survey, compared to a lower percentage of tour operators, and then also GSAs and other members that make up the industry. So the good news is that people and the traders looking to examine new destinations, and that's actually increased. And we've seen this, obviously this is everything from looking at international or domestic US destinations, but also looking at other, international destinations. As tour operators have had to adjust their business models, they really have been more open. And we hope that this is a trend that will continue. I think by looking at some of those figures that Jane presented on ATE actually shows that they are looking and they are interested in new product. If you think about a travel advisor that maybe had traditionally only sold or predominantly sold cruise, they are now looking to land destinations to sell and increase their portfolio. So where are they getting their information from? Well, the majority are getting them from tour operator or travel agency associations. So for the US, that would be entities like USTOA or ASTA, but they're also still very reliant on destinations. So the likes of Tourism Australia and other DMOs that are sharing this information. It's certainly dropped since our last study in October, but it's still really critical. The other thing that I think is really important to point out is that industry friends play a really important part, and I think this will continue to do so. For all those stakeholders that have relationships with North American travel advisors, they will turn to you and they will trust you to provide them on the ground sort of real-time details on what it looks like. I know myself today, I was talking to some colleagues in Canada and said, what is really going on in Canada? There's nothing like having that personal friend or colleague tell you what is happening in a destination. So the other thing that we have been talking about is what are consumers doing in terms of postponements and things like that. Obviously, we've been tracking this with this global travel distribution survey in 3 waves. We started in June of last year. We did a wave in October, and then this one, most of this information is from February. But there is still 55% of people are postponing their travel and their plans, with 34% cancelling. The good news is that 54% of those people are still looking to go where they originally booked. So, if someone was already planning to go to Australia, most people aren't not going to come. They will come when borders reopen. And I think the 30% that are waiting to decide, again, Australia has a lot of many compelling reasons to convince them to come back. Obviously, how Australia has handled COVID is probably one of the biggest ones. And then the majority of those postponements are looking into 2022. I think we've all gone through this state where we've, we might have made and cancelled plans and booked them 6 months ahead and thought things would open up or things would change. But I think now people are looking further out so that they potentially don't have to cancel on multiple occasions. And I think part of that is also the trade educating them to do it in that manner. And then obviously it's no great surprise that the bookings for international travel are much further into the future. So we're talking 7 months to 1 year, and then clients still waiting to decide when to travel. But certainly when we talk to tour operators, they are very optimistic about forward bookings, and we'll get a little bit more into intention into 2022 in a little bit. So I know the vaccine is certainly a very topical area, and we asked the trade, how do you think COVID vaccines will have an impact on international bookings during 2021? 41% think that will have a positive impact, but they're also saying that, destination health certificates and reducing quarantines and free COVID testing will also have an impact. So those two things are very big things to watch. We also wanted to get a sense of what is a vaccine passport or immunity passport, what impact will that have? So 56% of our distribution partners see it having a positive impact versus 66% globally. So I will say, as probably the world has seen, that, Americans don't like to be told what to do. We don't, we do like our freedoms, but I do think people are coming around to this idea, especially if it means they can go to certain destinations. But I also think there's a lot of topical conversation at the moment about privacy and how you do this safely, how it's just a record of a vaccine as opposed to a broader health record. So there is a lot of debate at the moment on this whole issue. But in terms of where that leaves the consumer with their intentions and what they're looking to do, we are seeing improvement in this area. 58% will get a vaccine as soon as one is available. Now, this information was from January. So as you heard in Jane's presentation, things are really opening up. I was at actually a work event the other day with some colleagues, and I was the only one out of 7 that hadn't had my first shot. I do have my first appointment, but I haven't physically had the shot yet. So I'm hearing more and more cases. The other interesting thing is that 14% say they will not get a vaccine. So that has increased, but as many of you have probably heard, it has all become quite political in the US. I think the best news out of our research is that with age and income and education, those numbers are much, much higher. So I would say, and there are other studies out there that have looked at international travelers or travelers that intend and want to travel internationally. I think the percentage of vaccine rates amongst those travelers is much, much higher. And I only hope that it will increase as obviously time goes by and obviously people see that it is very safe and certainly a means to opening up again. So what are the things that clients are asking for? And the travel advisors say destination health and safety certificates. Now, I think some of this is a little contradictory to what we maybe see going on, but that's what the travel advisors are saying their clients are looking for. The other thing that they're saying is one of their top 3 considerations is destinations and how the country's government has managed the COVID pandemic. So I think, again, I don't think Australia could be any better place that when things do open up, that there's absolutely no question that consumers will have no fear that if they're going to Australia, that's where they're going to contract COVID. So I think, again, we're in a good position from that perspective. The other thing we asked is about, what is the level of interest? What products are consumers asking about? It's not particularly much surprise that all-inclusive resorts are high on this list for North America, but it's also interesting to see the ocean cruises and river cruises are higher than maybe one would perceive given some of the challenges that they are going through and even went through at the beginning of the pandemic. I will say one of the reasons that we think all-inclusives are so high on this list is because they have done an excellent job of marketing in the US. They are constantly talking to travel advisors about what testing they have on property that you can just send away for your COVID test while you're staying in your hotel, what insurance they're including. And also the third thing is that if you do happen to return a positive test, you can actually continue to stay at the resort in quarantine at no cost. So I think the all-inclusive resorts have really done a good job of their messaging. And I think that's why they're getting such a high level of interest and making travel easy, which I think will be something that we will continue to obviously track and monitor post-pandemic. Again, in terms of favorite continents and regions that clients are interested in travel in 2021, I wouldn't be too alarmed by any of this. I don't think it's any surprise in 2021 that the Americas, so particularly, within the US, is going to be high. I think the optimism we should see in Europe, and again, this is where I say this information is a little bit contradictory in that, Europe's had its own issues with COVID. It hasn't always handled them as well as other countries, but yet people are still interested. And I think Africa typically wouldn't be quite as high as Asia or Australia, but I think part of that is because there are currently countries in Africa that are open, so you can still travel to some of the destinations there, which is why they're probably getting a little bit more of an uptick. We also looked at travel intentions of international travellers for our consumer survey. And as you can see in February, it was about 19% of those interviewed were looking to take an international trip in the next 6 months. This is not a massive concern to me when you look at January 2020 and only 24%. So again, this is a very broad survey. It goes out to a very big database of consumers. So I actually take optimism out of this, although as a percentage, it might not seem high to the average person. I think this is the other one that gives me great optimism, is that 78% of active leisure travellers are interested in visiting an international destination during the next 2 years. And I think this really speaks to the reasons that, Tourism Australia is doing some of the activities that they're doing. You have to keep a presence in market. You have to keep talking to those travellers that will travel and are interested. It's also interesting, I think, that boomers are showing less interest, and I think obviously this is the generation that has probably been hit clearly the hardest, and obviously feels like they're most at risk. So no great surprise that millennials and Gen Zs are the ones that potentially will get out there internationally before others. And then which international destinations are they interested in? And I think this goes a little bit to my earlier point, is that Europe, despite some of their challenges, is still hot on that list. Canada would typically be ahead of that, but I think the border restrictions with Canada have been even stricter than most countries in Europe. And again, where Oceania and obviously Australia and New Zealand sits, it's not particularly surprising. It's very consistent with how typical travel patterns go internationally. So then back to the travel advisors, it's no surprise that domestic travel is increased. And obviously travel advisors maybe traditionally wouldn't have sold so much domestic travel. They've really had to pivot. And I would say as some locations are getting harder and harder to find, turning to a travel advisor that can help you find maybe a house to rent on coastal Connecticut, or maybe a ski getaway in the winter. I think that's where they've found some of the new business, and again, no great surprise there. I think part of the other thing that we've got our eye on, and we think that over time this may also change, is that the seasons may extend. 39% said that they think that summer and winter seasons will extend, and this is obviously because we're more flexible. Companies are giving more flexible remote working opportunities and policies. So we do think that this may have some lasting impact. People maybe won't be so fixated to travel in traditional, US summer months, those sorts of things. The other one that I'm also optimistic about is that we are seeing some rise in length of stay. So again, maybe the pandemic has given us a chance to sit back and reset and say, I've earned my vacation time, I should be taking it, and I am going to take it and make use of it. So hopefully that is a good positive sign in the long term for Australia, where people will come and spend a little bit more time than they traditionally had. And then I think overall, distribution partners believe that suppliers' cancellation and flexibility policies are having a positive impact on their business. People can book, and I'm sure Beth can speak to this in more detail, but consumers can book into 2022 knowing that they can make changes or make adjustments if they need to. So I'd certainly say from a stakeholder perspective, really important to keep on top of that. Obviously be flexible. I know it has financial implications for everybody, but it is really important, and I think it will continue to be so. That will be one of those lasting impacts of the pandemic. And then in terms of what they're looking for DMOs, I know we have some of the states on the call, and obviously Tourism Australia, but presenting useful and timely data, introducing those health and safety certificates, and making marketing campaigns for consumers. We know, like most parts of the industry, tour operators and travel advisors will struggle, so they will look to DMOs to help them with that marketing. And then also, which of the health and safety certificates are travel advisors saying give them the most confidence? At the moment, they're saying international travel and tourism certificates, so the WTT stamp, those types of things. But I will say, I think destination certificates will gain some traction as, places like Singapore and other countries release programs. And certainly if Australia is looking to do so, I'm sure with a good marketing behind it, it will gather some traction and people will value it. In terms of when they're expecting business to return, clearly the majority think 2022. So that is really optimistic. And I think that's because travel advisors are seeing interest. It's just a question of how and when it will come back. I think one of the concerns for us is that there may be some shifts. When we asked them, if they thought staff or independent contractors might leave the industry, 51% said somewhat likely and 22% said very likely. So I'd say keep on top of your contact databases, see if agents are moving around and just try and get to those that are producing. I think it will be much like global financial crisis, that the ones that are doing well will survive and they will actually prosper in the new conditions post-COVID. And then just quickly to end up, the good news is, and I'll zoom through these last couple of slides, but travel advisors are open to new products. They are open to hotels and resorts they haven't previously sold. They're open to new destinations. They're open to work with new suppliers. So I'd say ATE is that perfect opportunity to get out there and start talking about your product and things like that. And then no great surprise to sort of end things off is that social media is continuing to be their number one marketing activity. So clearly important for all of us to keep on top of that, providing travel advisors with content, those types of things. I would say some of the advisors have really taken their social media to a new level in COVID, and there's some great advisor/influencers out there, and it's certainly one of the things that we're looking to work with. And then just the advisors, they think, they really believe in themselves, as I think they should, that they will be more valued, they will be trusted, and consumers will really look to them to help them navigate what travel looks like post-COVID. So we're very optimistic about, the role of travel advisors and tour operators going forward. We think that they will be, really important as we path our way to recovery. And we'll share this information with you afterwards, but you can get the Travel Council research online and also the portrait of the American traveller. Thanks, everybody.
Cool, Julie, thank you so much for joining us today and providing us that awesome insight. I know there was a ton of content there and you raced through it really, really quickly, but we'll be making the slides available after the presentation today. So if people want to download and read back through the material at their leisure, then they'll be able to do that. So thank you so much. Hi everyone, so my name is Chris Allis and I'm the Regional Partnerships Manager for Tourism Australia, based here in Los Angeles. I'm very pleased and excited to be joined by our great partner Virtuoso. So we're joined by Beth Butzlaff today. So Beth, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, it's our pleasure, and thanks for making the time. So we're just gonna have a bit of a chat, I think, and
I think that's great.
Yeah, and just maybe add some color from Virtuoso's perspective to some of the insights that we've been sharing that Jane shared with us earlier, and also what Julie was sharing with us today. So let's kick off with thinking about the traveler. So obviously, one of the things that Julie highlighted in particular was the propensity to travel and to travel more quickly on the back of this pandemic kind of increases with education and income, which obviously fits squarely into the Virtuoso consumer bracket. So can you tell us what trends you are seeing from your clients at the moment that are starting to book more heavily, and what you think this means for Australia in the more mid to long term?
Absolutely, and I should thank Julie for the segue of saying the travel advisor is going to be still used and very valuable. We are seeing the same. Unfortunately, the travel industry is no stranger to disruption, whether it's economic or terrorism or environmental. We have experienced quite a few disruptions in the last 40 or 50 years. But with that, from the Virtuoso perspective, we've always seen what comes out of it first is that intrepid, high net worth individual that seems to travel first. And Julie touched upon that in her presentation. They're the first to travel because they're the most experienced. They feel comfortable traveling. But generally, they're not affected so much with the economic pressures that others may feel. So with the economic considerations that others may have, they may not have those. So they are willing and able, and we're seeing a lot of positivity, just as Julie mentioned, that they're ready. There's this term that I think Julie or maybe Jane mentioned of revenge travel, and to me it's a little dark. Revenge travel. I think it's more of our those people that travel and on average spend $50,000 a year in travel are ready. They are ready to go. They're really booking that further out. Virtuoso has always been kind of that further out planner, because that high net worth individual is a planner. They like to know what's going to happen out there. But the trend that we are seeing is they're not only booking further, they're booking longer. So they have these, maybe instead of the 7-day, it's maybe a 20-day. So they're really looking at, if I'm going to really hunker down and enjoy and experience this destination. They're also, as mentioned, no surprise, they are looking at that private, exclusive experience, and we don't see that leaving anytime soon. We do see that this is going to be something that they're looking for, and that all-inclusiveness approach to travel, and beach destinations, and this idea of open spaces and places to escape. This is like the perfect match for Australia, and we see some really good optimism in the future for 22 and 23.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think some of the work that we've been doing with you guys, Beth, in terms of how we're talking to your advisor community at the moment, is really tapping into those trends and really reinforcing all of those core messages that we have to offer your clients when they're considering Australia at the moment. So that's fantastic.
Truly, I mean, I feel like you hit so many marks when it comes to our client and our advisors and Australia.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. So just moving on a little bit. So I guess in the lead up to this call, we had a bit of a conversation about more specifically what Virtuoso is just seeing more broadly in terms of business. And I think you were sharing some kind of specific snippets from some of your partners. So can you just share, I guess, anything that you're able to share in terms of just to bring to light how much demand there is out there at the moment and how it's being realized through your network at the moment for travel?
There are a few key indicators that we're seeing from the luxury perspective. We are the top client for all of the luxury cruise lines, and Regent Seven Seas just recently launched their 2022-23 World Cruise, and it sold out in a single day. And
wow.
That within itself is remarkable. But when you understand that these cruises go for $150,000 per person, that just even makes it even more remarkable. And they said this was their best day in history. So in the 26 years that they've been in operation, not only in the pandemic, but in their history, was their best day. And we're also seeing this in other verticals of travel. Not only that there's this idea of I'm going to go and I'm going to invest in these trips, but also higher categories and nicer accommodations. We're seeing that as well. So for instance, Oceana's is another cruise line that had a 180-day world cruise. They've just expanded that to add more days to that because they're seeing the demand in that. And then each quarter since the pandemic has begun, we've seen that each quarter getting better than the last quarter.
Mhm.
And March has just represented a month of production that's the best that we've seen, and we see it just continually to grow. And like Julie said, our partners are now seeing pre-pandemic sales.
Mhm.
And this is what's significant about this is that it's with new bookings, because as we know, there's a lot of people out there with credits and with a lot of those refunds and credits out there that they maybe didn't get a refund, but they're putting it into the future, which I think is even more positive, because all of these new bookings are new clients. And then that low hanging fruit of the credit that's out there just means that there's even more to come. I think one of the questions would be, why aren't they using that credit? And Julie again touched upon this, is that there's that kind of cancellation fatigue. Some of these people have rebooked 3 times.
Mhm.
So they're ready to wait and see, but I have no doubt that once things stabilize, they're going to book and book quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's great, and I think, you know, it's been interesting to see some of the commentary that's been coming from the North American-based airline partners in the last 3 to 4 weeks in terms of a real shift in terms of how the sector is going to recover. I think I was reading a couple of weeks ago that they predict that the US domestic airline industry will fully recover by early 2022, which is something we wouldn't have been saying 3 or 4 months ago. And I think American Airlines, you know, they recently said that they expect to have their entire fleet back flying by May, which is just fantastic. And I think it bodes really, really well. And yeah, and it just bodes really, really well. Yeah.
And just to give a little insight, we just had a member advisory board meeting and owners throughout the country, and all of them said they're bringing people back and that they're working 12 hours a day now.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just, it's coming in fast and furious, and it's really about how do they have the people to support the demand that's going to be out there.
Yeah. No, that's great. And that's a great segue into my next question, which really focused on the travel advisor. You know, I think we've been talking a lot about the travel advisor in the last year, and you know, I think a lot of consumers have really realized the value of their travel advisor, particularly early on in this pandemic, as you know, they were having to navigate, you know, ever-changing border situations and cancellations and changing policies with flexibility and rebooking. So, I think, it's great to hear that our advisor community is now busy on the other side, actually getting people to book and travel again, which is awesome. But what are your clients telling you around their perceptions of the travel advisor, and what are you seeing your travel advisor community do to help themselves navigate this time at the moment?
Well, as you mentioned, more than ever do they need a travel advisor. I mean, it is so complicated out there right now. There are so many different, and it's not only country, it can be per state in the United States of what is required. And so they're really leaning in. And then what is required for the country, but the property or the tour company? So the travel advisor really is such an important aspect of the client's experience in travel. We actually partnered with a company called YouGov to try to quantify this, and we found out that is exactly what we thought, is that clients overwhelmingly trust their travel advisor. By 81%, they find their advisor very trustworthy, and they lean on them and ask them for advice. So really, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. And one of the things that Matthew Upchurch always says, but it's really Churchill that said it first, is that don't waste a good crisis. And the advisors haven't. They have been training. We've seen this incredible increase, 92% of advisors' participation in trainings, and over 135,000 courses have been completed in 2020. And there's this really great trend that we're exploring and working internally as well, is that advisors are becoming more specialized. So whether that be, and Australia's been great at this, whether that be in wellness or family or adventure, there, or Lux specialty. And we have noticed that those specialized advisors significantly outpace the general advisor. So we're really working to increase that specialty kind of interests and passions, but I really recommend others do that too. If you have a specialty, if you have something that you really focus on, this is the time to really talk about that, because that's a trend that we're seeing evolve.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And that's a great segue into my final question before we throw it open to general questions. So in terms of, so we obviously have a great breadth of our industry partners based in Australia, who are not able to receive North American guests at the moment, but our advisor community is starting to get busier again. Julie shared some great insights in terms of how best to communicate, but just from your perspective, and not necessarily just for the virtuoso preferred partners that are on the call, but what advice would you give to our partners out there around how they keep connected to the advisor community in North America at the moment?
Yes, I'm going to reinforce a lot of what Julie said. Flexibility is absolutely key right now. We actually saw a hotel, a property that was in Florida that was sticking to their original cancellation policies, and they lost a booking that was up to $200,000 because of it, just because they wouldn't budge on the cancellation flexibility and deposit. So it doesn't have to be a big change in your terms and conditions, but really start thinking about being flexible during this time. It doesn't have to be forever, but people are still kind of shy about what's open, what's not, what's going to cancel. And so they need just to have that reassurance there. I would also say, don't go quiet. Don't, just because you think that people aren't traveling, I would say market. There is a strong desire for digital, but from the luxury perspective, the luxury client loves to have print. So we're seeing a big demand in print and great results from that too. So don't just when you're making your marketing plan, make sure it's diverse and you have a little bit of everything, but don't go quiet, because they're ready. They're really ready here in the US. I would also say, make sure you're very engaged with that travel advisor. Make sure they understand everything that you're doing to make travel easy for them and their client. So communication with them is absolutely key. And this has been said over and over and over again. And I think protocols has been a word that I will never use after this year, but safety protocols is really important for them the travel advisor specifically, to understand, so they can relay that information to the client. It's still something that they're very much interested in knowing. And so I think over communicating all of that is really key. And then I'm just going to say, finally, one last point is that everyone's on their own journey on this. Most people that are travelers, that are intrepid travelers, those luxury travelers, are going to be ready to go any minute. And then there's those that are going to take some time, as we see, it's, varies. But help the travel advisor create a roadmap for each of those clients, saying in 3 months, this is going to be available. 6 months, this is going to be something that you may want to look at. So make everything easy for them to book. And value does not mean discounts. So for the luxury travel client, the discount doesn't always seem to be the pull. It's either access or value. So remember that there's going to be high demand and maybe even some restrictions on going into certain areas or places. So make sure that you price that accordingly, but also make sure that they understand that this is exclusive access. And so the demand, I think, will really be there. But we're really optimistic about the future, and we can't wait to get to Australia.
Me too.
I'd be
Can't
there
wait to get
tomorrow
back
if you
down there.
allowed me in.
Yeah. Cool. Beth, thank you so much. We'll wrap that up there. But I think that you just said it a couple minutes ago, but I think the key message is that this market is definitely getting ready again, and I think we're ready when Australia is ready to get our travelers back down there. So that's great. And I think your last point on pricing is really, really important, because I think it's really critical to a lot of the businesses in Australia at the moment as they come out of the pandemic, and they continue to work through their kind of the commercials of their business. So I think the key question on discounting and what price value has, I think that's really important. So it's a great point. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
No worries. So we'll ask Julie and Jane and Lee to come back on screen. And Lee, I think we might have some questions. Oh, we can't hear you, Lee.
Uh-oh.
Oh. No, still can't hear you.
I can see one question.
Oh, there we go.
You got me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, sorry, I don't know what that was. Loose connection, perhaps, on my headphone jack. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jane, Julie, Chris, Beth. That was, I thought, not just insightful, it was actually really encouraging. I think that was probably the most encouraging news out of North America I've personally heard travel-wise for a year. It was great. So, that's it's really good news what you're all saying. Look, we haven't had a lot of questions come in, which is possibly good. We don't have a lot of you either answer them all, and we don't have a lot of time anyway. But look, a couple that we have had, and I'll throw these out to you. First one being, with the US emerging from the pandemic, what's the view from the market around the return of in-person industry events and the appetite for advisors to start meeting with suppliers face to face again? Don't know who wants to take that. Maybe you, Beth, or do you want to start on that one?
Sure. I think that it's going to be a hybrid moving forward. The human connection will never go away. There is a really important part to seeing someone face to face. I also believe that virtual has provided opportunities that in-person hasn't as well. Expanding the audience, for instance, our independent contractors are all over the country. They're in very rural places. They're in very remote places. And so they may not have been able to come to live in-person events previously. Now they're able to experience that. So I don't think it's either or. I think it's yes to both. And that's not going away anytime soon. But Julie may have a different perspective to that, Julie.
No, I would agree 100%. I think, it's one of the reasons we're all in this industry, right, is that it's the connections. And as we saw, people are getting information from their travel industry friends and what they consider their family. So no, I agree. I think there is a demand. I mean, we're looking at familial trips for some destinations that we know advisors are really interested to participate in. So no, there definitely is demand out there, but I agree it's given us maybe access to things that we hadn't before. So it'll hopefully be the best of both worlds.
Right, and then a couple of interesting questions. Next one being, North Americans themselves, when do they perceive that they'll be able to travel to Australia? What's their perceptions on this?
I know, at least from our side, we haven't asked that question. I think it's sort of a rolling, it's a rolling thing. I mean, I think they're looking to destinations that maybe are open. There's places in Africa that are, as I mentioned, already open. I think Europe is topical, and maybe Beth can talk about this. I think because traditionally Europe has been a big travel destination in the summer. So I think people are definitely looking to that and maybe still hoping that they may get to some parts of Europe in the summer. But I think that is probably next on the radar. And then, again, just at least from the few people I've spoken to, and certainly from my own personal perspective, I think we're still optimistic that late 2021 into 2022, but I think that's more so probably anecdotal than it is on anything that we've specifically asked.
Anyone else want to add to that? Or?
Well, I agree 100%. I think it's, Europe has always been kind of Italy's always on that top 3 of every list, but Australia is on that list too. And I think it's mainly, do they want us? We want you, but do you want us? And we've seen it's actually very positive to see that Australia has been very strict, because it creates a sense of confidence and comfortability. But in the short term, I think they think it's not accessible. So I'm going to go over to Europe, so I think that where these numbers right now, I think what Julie actually mentioned this, like, don't get too concerned with these numbers, because I think it's this moment in time. I think that will shift a little bit as things open up more.
Yeah, I thought the encouraging thing in one of your points, Julie, was that you said something around 54% of North American clients were looking to go where they'd already booked, which I thought, was pretty encouraging, because I guess we know in the short term we'll possibly lose some business to Australia, as other countries perhaps open before us. But that was an encouraging statistic, I thought.
And I think also the industries work so hard to keep those people interested in the destination.
Yes.
So I think they've done a really excellent job of doing that, be it the travel advisor or the tour operators, just saying, keep that deposit or those funds on hold, and we'll get you back there as soon as we can.
Yeah. We have now hit an hour. I don't know, Jane, Chris, have either of you got anything else you want to finish on?
I would just add to that last question. I see there's a couple of questions just around, with this rising optimism and the massive pent up demand, are we, because Australia, will not be the first destination to reopen to Americans, are we at risk of missing some of that pent up demand? And I think, it's a really good question, and we won't be the first destination to reopen to Americans, but I do think that we will have a lot of advantages coming out of this, and certainly being a bucket list destination. And I think not just in the first 6 months, but ongoing, one reaction out of this crisis, I think a lot of people have, is to say they want to bring forward those really aspirational destinations and experiences that they've always wanted to visit and experience. And so that's why we feel it's really important to keep active and engage with both consumer and industry audiences to make sure, we don't control the timing, but it remains top of mind for for both those audiences, and that Australia is part of their plans as soon as it's accessible to them. So I don't know whether Beth or Julie or Chris have anything to add on that, but I think it's not just an opportunity to be first, it's an opportunity to really bring people back in big numbers when people do come back. So
yeah, and I think the other thing that I think we take confidence in as Tourism Australia, in terms of all the work that we've been doing in the last 12 months in this market in particular, is we consistently receive feedback from our partners here that Australia is one of the more active destinations at this time. And I think that will really stand us in good stead when people are able to book with more confidence again, that Australia has been there. We've been supporting our partners, not just in Australia, but also here as well. And I think that will really help us accelerate our recovery at the point in time when we get that border open again. So
that's probably a great note to finish on. To all our participants today, thank you. All our speakers, thank you. To everyone who's watching, thanks for joining us today, and look forward to seeing most of you at ATE coming up not very soon. Those of you who can make the live event, the rest will be virtual, of course. But thank you everyone for joining us. We'll finish up now, and this will all be sent out to everyone pretty shortly in terms of the recordings and things. So thanks again, everyone. Bye.
thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.